Hello again to all my friends in Zambia. This is Steve Walkup in Patterson as we continue through the Gospel of Mark.
Okwetu onse wa Zambia amwane Steve Walkup ne mkwetu Patterson twatwaza mu buku wa Marko mu Kaonde.
Remember, we are currently in the epilogue, that is the conclusion of Mark, showing that Jesus not only resurrected from the dead, but we have many eyewitness accounts proving that Jesus is alive and well.
Twaya pano kumpero ya buku kina kwitu mwaisha pano mba Yesu Kristu wavuka kazuna kunengeja kuwera muyuru.
Today, we will first look at the verification of the empty tomb on Sunday, April 3rd, AD 33.
Ape pazuwa zaero tsakutera munkamwa mu buku ne kumweka bya mwekere kwaye nkambo kachanje kuwera muyuru ne.
Now, first of all, the first witness of Jesus being raised from the dead is that the guards saw an angel roll away the stone of the tomb.
Watanamba abashirikare bazingako iyo bamwene ziwe kufumako ku kirende.
Let's turn to Matthew chapter 28 and read verses 2 through 4.
Batumone Mateo chapter 28 sa kutanga tumavesa vizi tendekera pa 2 gane ponka pa 4. Baka vizi za sabato pokupita kava yene kumya muzuba zitanshi za murungu. Bashirikare baishire ba Maria wakumanganderana ne Maria atu mkwabo mukumona kirende kaziponkapo kwa zinga itentanshi ikatampe mambo maraika wankambo waikizire muyuru kuya kwiwa mkirako zivwe waikere ponka pa zivwe.
Okay, so we see in this account here of Matthew, the first day of the week after the Sabbath, that is on Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb, and there was a great earthquake that they felt there, because an angel of the Lord rolled away the stone.
Mbape twamona awa Maria ne Maria wakumangandarena bayobaire nziba zitansi za murungu mbaba taine konka kwa kirende maraika wafumisheko zivwe.
And notice here that the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men.
Mbape bamvune vingi moyo pokumona ya mwekere.
Now, they reported to the chief priests what had happened. Read Matthew 28:11 through 14.
But tendeke pa chapter 28 kuma pa 11 kene ponka 14. Mwiwa kirenga ponka po bakarama baishire muji ne kwibabura banganga bakatampe bintu byonse bya mwekere kazoba pwire pomo na bakurumpe baisire kize ne kwibapa bakarama ndarama yavura mbamukambe amba bana banzi babwanga bazikuya ufuku ne kumwiba kasatwarara kazumbwe zafika matwi aye mwine ndamakyaro tukamutabisha ne kumu mwena.
So the first group that we see that is witness to Jesus not being in the tomb are the guards who saw the angels, saw the stone rolled away, and then went and reported it and were bribed not to say anything.
But wamwisha tuburongo ne kumona amba bazinga batanshi kumona kya mwekere kewa bazinga ko bashirikare yobare na kwamba kubanganga bakatampe babe bapere mali kwamba bule kwamba bishinka byoba mwene byamwekere na meso wabo.
Now, soon after the stone was moved, Mary Magdalene, James, mother of Mary, and Salome, and others reached the tomb.
Mba Petro amona mba wa Maria ne bokwabo ne Salome mba ibo baile ne fika konka kwa kirende.
Now, let's read Matthew chapter 28, verses 5 through 7.
Kwa tufike ponka Mateo chapter 28, mwane ponka pa 5, fike ne ponka pa 7. Kumbwa malaika wibambile wana banzamba kanje mube moyone mambo na yuka namba mukeba Yesu yeba popere pa musalaba kazi muno ne mambo wasanguka monka mwambizire yayi mukamumone poarazire kambo kazi yayi nga rubiro kaburai bana banzi babwanga amba wasanguka mubafu kazi wambwa watangireko kungalirea konka kwa mukamumona mbwe yo bene mubura kazi bafumineko ukizi ukirende kazi bazinga na moyo ne rusekero rukatampe pamo baile rubiro mukubura bana banzi babwanga.
Okay, so notice here, after the guards leave, the angel tells the women who are there that Jesus is no longer in the tomb, that he is risen from the dead.
Mbape bana banzi babwanga ne bazinga kirende mbe babuzira mba kemwazine wabuka.
Now, we have the same thing that happens here as recorded in Mark, showing that Mark is following Matthew here.
Bape bintu byane mbwa mbuku wa Mateo kutsaka mwene mbuku wa Marko kinakurumbura mba Marko warondoleze nga burongo byane mbwa Mateo.
Let's read Mark 16, 1 through 8.
Kutsaka kutanga Marko chapter 16 tendekera pa 1 kane pa 8. Kusanguka kwa Yesu mubafu kazipo kupita zuwa za Sabato, Maria wa kumangandelena ne Salome ne Maria inanzi Yakoba wapotere binunka burongo batukaye mushinga kaziba imene machachacha zuba zitanshi za mulungu kafike kirende pokusera zuba kaziba banengeje nga bene na bene ngenyi usakwitu mishako zibwe kukibero kya kirende kazipa kutakuna ko bamwene zibwe zaru mukako kara kuba zazi zikatampe zine kazipa kutwera mukirende bamwene nsongo warume kasai kara ukiruzo kya bivwaro kya repa kitoka ponka apo bakumenye bingi myane anweba mukeba Yesu mwina Nazara yeba popere musaraba wasanguka ketsi uzimunone tarayi kitwa wazire pano yayinga mukabure bana banzi babwanga ne Petero amba aye ukatangira ko kungalirea konka kwa mukamumona byonka byo emubuzire ponka po barupukire banyemene ko kirende pokuba bajimangene ne kukumya bingi kesi baambire kintu nangwa ku muntu umone mambo bawo bire moyo.
So far we have the soldiers that have said the stone is rolled away. They are testifying, eyewitnesses, and then they were bribed. Now we have the women, Mary Magdalene, Mary of James, and Salome, who reach the tomb, and the angel tells them he's not there, he's risen from the dead.
bape twamona bashirikayo bamwene zibe bazafuminengako nabe bapere mali nekuba pamafisakanwa kebambire byo bamwenene no twamona aye Mary ne Salome bamona nabo na meso wabo zibamona ne marayika bebaburamba bakonsha kuyapa no kubura bana banzi babwanga bintu byamweka.
Notice that the angel tells them to go tell the disciples, including Peter, that Jesus will meet them in Galilee.
Mbape kuika potune Petero bayo bambiziramba bakasambakana konka kwa kungalileya.
But what did they do? They fled the tomb and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. So we have fear from the guards and fear from the women.
Mbaba wire byepi mbaba korubiro ezifopo na ngomo yeba buzire kyamwekane.
Now we see that in John chapter 20, let's turn to John chapter 20, because we have all four gospels recording this.
Baendele kazibaire konka kwa ne kulondera yeba buzire ba malaika.
Now let's read actually chapter 20, verses 1 through 2.
But tange chapter 20 ya Mateo.
John 20, 1 through 2.
Oh,
John
chapter
20. John 20, verses 1 and 2.
Tange Yohano chapter 20. Yohano chapter 20.
Verses 1 and 2.
Verses 1 to
2. 1 and 2.
Mba mambo kirende nebyawubire yamwekere mu bizi kabizi mu zuba zitanshi za Mulungu Maria wakumangandarera wakere kirende kasapa afita ne aye waimene siwe pafumyako kara kirende ponkapo aye wanyemezire kwishimona Petero ne kumwana wabwanga mukwabo yatemena Yesu ne kwibaburamba bafumyamo nkambo mukirende ne atwe bakristo ayuka kuba mutwarane.
Now you may be asking yourself, well, maybe this is not accurate because John is not recording the other women that were there that Matthew records and that Mark records.
Mbapenge mwamona mbiwamba Yohano wavika mune Yohano mba wazinga ponka kunaowa mkwabo ke wamuvika mune mkulemba kwanzi Mateo.
But remember, they don't have to record everything that happened. John says there were many things that Jesus did that he didn't record. He only recorded the things that were important to the points he was trying to make.
Bape mafuna kuburongwamba byonse byamwekere nangwa byawire Yesu ke byonse byanemberwene mbaye Yohano wamba mbakuzi bintu byavura Yesu byawire ne kuba ke byonse byanemberwene.
Each one of the Gospels record the events that happened that are important to them, and they omit things that are not important so they don't distract from the point they're trying to make.
mbape bana banzi babwanga nangwa banembeshi mba banemba bintu bikatampe mba bakatanganga bakayuke kine tuntulu kwa kura kuya mungi.
So John says on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early. That's true. She went with other women, but he didn't include that because it's not important to what he's trying to say.
Mbape ngetwamona mu chapter 20 verse 1 ambakaizi muzuba zitanshi za mulungu Maria kasapa fita naye wa mwene ziwe kafwako mweke wazinga bunkene wazinga na bakwabo panoke batongola amazina ne bakino kecyane mane.
Then it says, while it was still dark, she saw that the stone had been taken away. He doesn't talk about the
Mba
angel
ropa
or anything else. He just shows what happened here and then what Mary does in response to an empty tomb.
Mbape kecyane mbwa kapa kifita chakine pafisire nibafikire kokwa nibamwene kirende kekwazinga ziwe zikatampene.
So John omits that she was with other women, that the angel spoke to her, and he goes straight to her, leaving there at that time and going and reporting it to Peter and John, actually, all the disciples.
Mbape ngematara yepo kunemba yowano washapo majina abavura bazingapo mino watongola abana babwanga bonka bazingapo bokwabo kewe batongolene.
So she goes and reports to the disciples that the tomb's empty, and Peter and John run back to the tomb and they witness that the tomb is empty.
Mbape enkawa Maria waena kiwa buramba mukirende bafunya mu bizuwa nkambo bashimona ne Yohanu banyemezire kuya ukirende necyakine bakataine mu bizikafamu.
So now we have the guards who have witnessed the tomb is empty and the stone is rolled away. We have Mary Magdalene, James, the other Mary, and Salome, and we have John and Peter.
Mbapenge mwalondera bulongo twatana mba batanshi bamwene ke bashirika bataine kufumapo paishire Mary wa kumangandarena ne Yakoba anzu watainwepo bainanzi Yakoba kawizamba ne Maria nanzi banyemene pano ne bana banzi babwanga Petero ne Yohana na abo baina kubizika mbatwale ano mambo.
So nobody has seen Jesus yet, but what they've witnessed is that the tomb that Jesus was buried in and the stone rolled in front of is now empty and the stone's been rolled away.
Mbakyo bataine cyakine ziweka fwako kazine mu bizuwa nkambo mukirende momwa moba mubikire ke wazinga monene.
Okay, now let's see verification around Jerusalem of the risen Christ on Sunday.
Ono apepo no tumone kyamwekere mu Yerusalema mambo akubuka kwa mkunji.
Jesus first appeared to Mary Magdalene after Peter and John left the tomb, she mistook the person that she saw as a gardener.
Mbange twatanga bulongo ne kurondera twamona mba Yesu puno washire wa mweka ku Mary awa Maria wa kumangandanena Petero ne Yohanu ne shiba mopokara baya pono wa Maria wa mwamba kampe au no yeura mabuzimi.
Let's read John chapter 20 verses 11 through 17, please.
But to tange Yohana chapter 20 teleka pa 17 tufike neponka pa 20.
John
Kumva
20,
Yesu
John
iwambizi
chapter
yamba
20,
kanje
verses 11 through 17.
busawandekera pa 11 chapter 20 tufike neponka pa 17. Yohana chapter 20 tusandika pa 11 tufike neponka pa 17. Yesu vyamwekere kwi Maria pokuwa Maria waimene panje ya kirende kasazira kazibiwa azizirenga wivandamine nekusambira mu kirende wamwene bamarayika babizi mubitoka kasa baikara umo ku mutwe nemukwabo ku maulu konka kwarazire mubizi wa Yesu kumva abo bamwambire inetu muziraka kumva bambizira mba nzira mambo bamfumyamo nkambo wami neyamiwa kesi na yuka ko bamutwarane yoambirenga byo bino nekufum tukirakoko wafutukireko wa mwene Yesu kasa aimana pokuwa bino kesi wayukire amba ye Yesu ne Yesu wamwambizira amba inetu muziraka mukeba nganyi aye byorangurukire ngamba yeura mu buzima wamwambizira amba mwane inge yenu mwapura muno mburaeko mumwamutwara amiwa kamusende kumva Yesu wamwambizira amba Maria nekufutukirako wafutukireko nekwamba mukieveru amba Raboni ko kwamba amba mfundishi kazi Yesu wamwambizira amba kanje mukwatene mambo kyanje kukanzira kwi batata pokuba yainga kuziba rongo bana mukeba bure amba kanzira kubatata neshenu kwiresa wami neresa wenu.
Notice here that this is the only gospel that records Mary meeting Jesus in such detail.
Mbapano apa aye wambire amba ukyanje kwika kwiwaresa tata.
He shows, John records, that Mary is weeping. She doesn't know where Jesus is gone. She sees the gardener there. She doesn't recognize Jesus until he tells her, Mary, it's me.
Mbapenge mwatira burongo awa Maria kiwa yukizire amba we Yesu ne katukonga pakya kya kimye aye Yesu mwene kiwa ambire amba ya amua.
She tries to grab him. Jesus is not saying, you can't touch me because I'm in this resurrected state. He is saying, I can't stay here. I have other things to do. Go report what you've seen.
Mbapamba amkwate mboa kaina mba ine kyanje kufika. Mkiambo chikwa mwambizire ngamba amua zinavyavura vyakuwa. Uwa uyenga tuna kwamba bintu vyowamona.
Notice now, if we turn to Mark, Mark is the only other person that records that Mary saw Jesus first. So we have two references from Mark and John that she saw him, but all he says is she goes and reports to the disciples what she saw.
Mbapano mtu watangane kumona upazitu vyambo. Apo mwine Yesu yamba mba yainga mukambe bintu yowa munoboa bana bami babwanga.
So let's read Mark 16, 9 and 10.
But tufuna tuvere ku buku wa Marko chapter 16 tutange ne verse ya 9 ne 10. Kazi Yesu byasangukire rukerokero pazuba zitanshi za Mulungu wa mwekere patanshi kwi Maria wa kumangandarena yapangire mu bandemona batanu ne babizi ayengako nanzi Yesu yoba zizenga kuba mabingo kabizi abo bakumva mba mumi wazinga kamweke kwi abo barengurirenga.
Now, after Mary sees the resurrected Jesus, she goes back and reports to the disciples that she has seen him.
Mbape ayevya mwene pano mkurunji wa sanguka bo aire ne burabo.
Now read John 20, verse 18.
But tuwere konka ku Yohano chapter 20 mane verse ya 18. Mba Yohano chapter 20 ne verse ya 18. Mba Maria wa kumangandanena waishire ne kuwabura bana banzi babwanga mba na mumona nkambo ne byoambire bino bintu.
Now notice John tells that Mary went and reported it to the disciples, but John does not say what the response is from the disciples.
Mbape twamona pakutanga mu Yohano twamva mba waile na kubura bana banzi babwanga nomukumbu yebambire mbake wamwekelene.
Why? Because John is not concerned that the disciples disbelieved at this point like Mark is. Remember, Mark is going to say, you need to go and report in your commissioning that Jesus has resurrected from the dead.
Mbape ayewashire nekona kubabura mbafana kuswa nekuba mweshamba kyakine kambo wabuka kufuma kubafu.
Let's read Mark chapter 16, verses 10 and 11.
Batuye ku Marko chapter 16 verse 11. Mba kabizi abo pokumva mba mume wazikumweka kwi aye barengurirenga mino yopapisire wamwekere musango ungi bana banzi bakwabo yoba enderenga muzishinda kuya kucyaro kazine abo nabo baire kaba bura kuyuka ne abo nabo ketsi batambwire ne.
Notice that Mark emphasizes that they did not believe Mary's report, where John doesn't say anything about it, because Mark is going to focus on them not believing the report of these people.
Bapenge mwatela makupo kwamba kwanzi mba abo ke baswire wewe babuze bakwa bazinga pone nansi nangwa mkulembo kwanda kumwesha mba bazinga mirengurira ke baswire kyakini mba wabuka kufuma kubafune.
Now let's turn back to Matthew chapter 28, verses 9 and 10.
Mapono tsako tuwelezi Mateo chapter 28 ne verse ya 9
and 10.
Mateo chapter 28 verse ya 9 and pa 10. Bakabizi ponka po Yesu wasamba kene amba mutende. Matthew chapter 28 verse 9 to 10. Ponka pa 10. Bakabizi ponka po Yesu wasamba kene amba mutende. Kazi oru ne kumpopwera ampopwere zirenga. Kepo Yesu iwambi ziramba kanje mube moyone yainga kaburayi barongo bami baye kungalileya kuko bakantana.
Notice here that Jesus appeared a second time to the other women. This is after he had shown himself to Mary. Now he's showing himself to the other women returning to the tomb.
Mbape mwamona mbaye pano wa mwekerekazi ne kubo kwabo babakaji bayire kukirende.
Now, you may never have heard this or seen it, but Jesus appeared to Peter during the afternoon of his resurrection.
Bape twamona mba aye wa mwekere ne ku Petero mikwa fumine twavukire.
Let's turn to Luke chapter 24, read verse 34.
Batuye konka kuruka chapter 24 ne verse ya 34. 24 ne verse ya 34.
Go ahead and read Luke 24:34.
24 ne verse ya 34 amba sa vamba kine nkambo wasanguka wazikumweka ne kuishimona.
Notice here that Jesus appeared to Peter that very day by himself.
Mbape twamona mbaye mwine nkambo wamwekene ku Petero mzonka za zuva.
And we also can see this, that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 5, actually, let's read 1 Corinthians 15, 4 and 5.
Mbape pansa kuya ku Korinda tumone yovamba. Uku wa Korinda kutunukuya chapter 15,
1
Korinda
Corinthians
chapter
15, 5.
15 verse ya 5. 1 Korinda chapter 15 verse ya 5 na kwamba bino mba nekumweka wamwekere kwikaifasa kazine kuba zikumi neba bizi.
So the very day that he rose from the dead, according to the scriptures, he was seen by Cephas, that is Peter, then later that night by the 12.
Mbape bamba mbakaifasi yewenka wazina za Petero bakazi wa mwekere ne kubokwa obana banzi babwanga.
That's the third person that's seen Jesus. We saw Mary, then the women together, then Peter. Now we're going to have a fourth time on the same day.
Mbape twamwe munga mzuba zimo aye Yesu wa mweka kwa Maria kazine ku Yesu ne ku Petero kazine kubokwa bakwawo bana banzi babwanga munka muzuwazimu.
Let's first of all turn to Mark chapter 16, verses 12 and 13.
Batuye ku Marko, Mateo, Marko. Batuye ku Marko
Mark
chapter
chapter
16.
16.
Tumve Marko chapter 16, ne verse ya 12.
12 and 13.
Mbabino yobyapisire wamwekere musango ungi kubanzi babiziba bakwabo yobaenderenga zishinda za kuya kukyaro kazine abo baire kaba mura bikwabo ne abo kesi baitabire ne.
Notice Mark doesn't give much detail, but it says after he had appeared in another form, the two of them were walking in the country. So he's appearing after he did to Mary, after he did to Peter, that he's going to appear to two disciples on the road to Emmaus.
Amba penge mwatara mbo wamwekere kwa wakaji kazi wamwekera kui Petero kazambo wamwekere kwa baenderenga mukyaro abairenga konka kwa kwemasa.
Now, Mark is not following Matthew at this point, he's following Luke.
Bapenge mwarondera ne kumona mba Marko pano apeo na kurondera munka mwapisire Luka.
Let's read Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35.
Luka chapter 24,
verses 13 through 35.
ne verse ya 13 begin konka 35.
Notice here that Luke is going to give great detail to the two people Jesus meets on the road to Emmaus. Mark only said a little about it.
Mbaruka usakupana
So let's read Luke 24, 13 through 35.
13 fikene konka ku 35 bamuyanwe babalenga muzonka za zuba mujiyo yabatera mba emasa kwazinga misonshi mufurongo 50 nezimo kufuma Yerusalema ne abo bene na bene baile na kwisamba mambo abyonse yaubirwe kaziponka po abo besambirenga ne kwibe puja bene na bene Yesu mwine wafwenye kwipi kaye nabo pomo bino meso abo ashinkire amba tuka muyuka ne aye bibambizira amba rero nkanye byambo yomuya na kwisamba kepo baimene ne kwiba pompomwena kumva umo zijina zanzi kisaropa mba rero anweba mwivenyi mu Yerusalema bunke bwenu bya musarabu kuyuka bya rutamo muno monyi kumvaye amba ivika ne abo bamwambizire amba bya Yesu wa Nazara wazinga ngauji waresa mukatampe mubibiro ne mubyambo kumeso aresa ne abantu bonse ne banga bakatampe ne banda makyaro betu woba musorezire bamufumishe ano akurufu ne kumwipaya bamwipayire konka kumusarabu ponka po anweba tekera inamba ukabuka pena isarera kine kavizi ne bakwawo zimo zuba za busatu kufuma ko zuba zo bamubire bino kabizimu bano bana bakaji bakwetu bazikura baokerera ku kirende betubura nekumvwa kabizi byo bakura kutana mumvisi wanzi baya na kwamba tumone nekimwesho kya bamalayika bambamba ye mumi ponkapo bakwetu bamo botwazi nabo baya kirende bazikutana monka mwambizire bana bakaji okuba aye kesi wazi mone ponkapo aye wibambizira mba anweba birubi neba misima yabanda kwitabira byonse byambo byabunga byaresa kesi kyafuainwa Kristu kumanama byonka byo nekutwera murukumo rwanzi nekutwara ku Mosesa nekubanga ojubaresa bonse byonse bintu bya mwine kazi kufika ne muji wailenga ne aye iwobire nobe unakupitaila ponkapo abo ba nyemenyamba ikarayi ne atweba mambo mabanga zuba za yakara ne kutwera watwere nabo kwikara nabo kabizi ponkapo bya kazire nabo kutebulu washikuire shinkwa ne kumupesha ne pakumutebula wibapere ponkapo meso abo arabire ne kumuyuka bamuyukire kazi wibamire kazi bamwambine bene na bene amba misima yetu keibe bitu burongo ngunda byokya kwisamba kana anweba muzishinda nobe za kwirumburwiranga binembero ni ponkapo baimene kimye kimoto kaba bwereka Yerusalema bakataine ne kujinga nabo ne kwibambira kine nkambo asanguka wakumwekera kwishimona ne abo baambire bya muzishinda ne byo ayukire kuyabo pokutebura shinkwa.
Notice here, the same day, these two men are walking to the road to Emmaus, which is 7 miles away from Jerusalem, and Jesus finds them and he says, "Why are you so sad?"
Mbapenge mwarondera burongo aba babizibana babwanga bairenga kwa masa mbabazinga na buranda wiwe kwijamba kika kyomwamwe sha buranda.
The men say, "You must not be from around here because everyone knows the news that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified 3 days ago."
Bamkumbwira mba papitemo basatu Yesu wa kunazara bamupopere pa musaraba.
He was a mighty prophet of God and told us many great things.
Mba wazinga nga ujuwa kine wakwaresa wambire bintu bya vura bya kumya.
In fact, we were hoping, we believed he was the Messiah and he died, so we're very sad.
Mba twabikira mba kyakina unoye mpurushi Mesaya unakimye chwafuire utwambwine bingi buranda.
Jesus told them they were very foolish and slow of heart to believe that what the prophets had said and what Jesus had taught is that he is alive and well, as he had to die, be buried, and raised from the dead.
Mba pewe mwesheza bya kwibambira mba kemwa kabine mberonyi kazamboka buko kekara wa mweo.
Then he expounded with them all the things of the scriptures, and they knew who he was.
mbapewa ambire nabo byavura bya mabuku kazamba kiba mubikisha mbayene.
So they asked him to go and eat with him, and he did, and he opened their eyes to all, taught him who he was, and then he vanished from their sight.
Mbape ambaye bamwambizira mba abayena nzimunzuwo bakime kyo batewire nga shinkwa upo bafikire bamuyuka bwafuma emukyenkyabo.
As soon as Jesus left them, they ran and reported to the disciples what they had seen.
Mbakufuma tukime kyo bashire nkambo babaye rubiro nekwera ku Yerusalema nekwera kubura abana banzi babo ngamba wasanguka.
So now we have had 4 different sightings from Mary Magdalene, from though the 11 didn't believe her report, from the other women, from Peter, and from the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus.
Baepono twamona ke bipanyi binga tanshi twamona bainetu twamona Petero basi twamona ne bana babwanga abayerenga konka kwa kwemasa.
Now, Jesus is going to appear for a 5th time. Let's read Mark 16:14.
But mone pano Mateo Marko chapter 16
Verse 14.
verse 14. Marko chapter 16 verse 14. Marko chapter 16 verse 14. Mbakabizi parutwe wa mwekezerene kuba 10 ne umo tobakire nkuza naye wa imene mambo ba mirengurira yabo ne ukosa kwa misuma yabo mambo kesi baitabire abo yoba mwene yoba sangukire ne.
Notice that Mark does not give much detail here. What he says is later he reported himself to the 11, showed himself to the 11, and he rebuked them for their unbelief and hardness of heart. What? Because they had not believed the reports from the people earlier in the day who had seen him.
Bape ngemata zisha mako ke watu elishamu tune mbawa ile ne kwiwa kazira mambo kayo babuzire kubitabira uko yobambire bana banzi babwanga.
Now, just like John had done with Mary, John is going to report even greater detail of that night.
Mbape yonkayo kya mwekere Yohanu byanemba mbone abuno betsa byanemba muno isa kumweka ne kutura bya mwekere bonka ba ufuku.
Let's read John chapter 20, verses 19 through 23.
But mune Yohanu chapter
20, verses 19 through 23.
By Yohanu chapter 20,
verses 19 through 23.
Verse 19, but 20. Bakalizi za ubireke mabanga zonka za zuba zitanshi za murungu nebibero kasaba bashinka mubazi bana banzi babwanga mambo kusina ba Yudea Yesu waishire ne kwima na mukati ne kwibambira mba mutende kuyanweba naye byo bambizirenga byobyo biba mwesheshe maboko anzi ne mavu anzi okuba bana babwanga basekere okumumona kambo.
Notice that John gives more detail. First of all, he doesn't just say later, he says later that same evening. So that means that same evening, he is going to appear. And it says he appeared to only 10, not 11, because Judas Iscariot's not there. That's why they always refer to the 11. And doubting Thomas is not there that night.
mbapenge mwarondera bulongo musa kumona mba bazinga tu 10 mambo yudasa wafuminepo kazi tomasa ke wazinga pone inambara byakera 10 pona ye waishire wamweka munkamwa kasikabo.
So the Gospels refer to the 11, even though sometimes the 11 all are not there, like doubting Thomas. He's 10, but he will be held responsible because he's not going to believe the report of these people. He's going to be like the other 10, Jesus rebuking them for not believing the reports of other people.
Mbape aye bakamukazipira nka tomasa naye bakwabwabe mambo akura kuswa bintu yobambwine kufuma kuba kwabo.
So what we have seen today is we have seen the Gospels giving eyewitness testimony to an empty tomb and to a resurrected Christ.
Babetwamuna lero nekumbwa ke bintu byambiwa kwamba mba zashiza nkambo zifike konse yonka byambire kubana banzi babwanga.
And we can see by all of these different people, guards, the women, Peter, the two on the road to Emmaus, and the disciples themselves, we have multiple eyewitnesses giving credibility to the resurrected Christ.
Mbape bonko betwambwa kuba bakaji bairenga ku zishine za kwemasa kazi ne bana banzi bonse babwanga bambire pomba abino byambo no kutatwamba aye mukurushi wabuka.
And we have only looked at the sightings that happened that same day. We haven't even gone to days later than that we will look in at our next session.
Mbape twamuna tukyamwekera pozonka za zuba apukurutwe.